As Farm Equipment is preparing for its 55th anniversary of publication and 20 years of Lessiter Media owning the title, we wanted to get some of the editors together that have been leading the magazine together to talk about the history, how things have changed over the years. I'm Kim Schmidt, executive editor. I'm joined by Mike Lessiter, the editor-publisher, and Dave Kanicki, former executive editor. Mike, to start off, can you just kind of share the story of how Lessiter Media came to acquire Farm Equipment?
Sure. It's a great story, actually. I came back to the family business in the fall of 2003, and our plan was to go out and buy something. And we've been looking around and engaged with brokers, and really were not seeing anything at all that was very interesting to us. It was frustrating because I needed something to do and something to sink my teeth in here. I was executive vice president, which was a administrative type role and strategic role, and not everyone was too excited about that. And our good friend Don Henning, who had been executive vice president out at Johnson Hill Press for most of the 70s up until the early 90s or so, knocked on our door one day and said Farm Equipment, which had been the flagship title of Johnson Hill, and then Johnson Hill became Cygnus, and he heard that there was talk about shutting it down. And he came in and grabbed me and my dad and said, I think you guys should go for it. I know this title has a lot of promise, and I think you should throw your hat in the ring. We thought about it for a little bit and weren't certain that it was making sense for us, even though we were an ag publisher. And Don didn't let it go. He kept pushing it at us, saying, I'm not going to, you guys need to look at this. And we looked at it and made an offer. And the issue had basically skipped one issue, but we brought it back out from its deathbed and started up in the summer of 2004 with our first issue. And it involved not only Farm Equipment, but Ag Industry Watch, which I'm sure you and Dave will talk more about here today, and what was called Farm Catalog, which we eventually rebranded as our Farm Innovations magazine, a product guide for high income, high acreage farmers.
Okay, so then starting in 2004, once Lessiter had acquired Farm Equipment, there was a change in focus in how we were covering the industry and moving to covering the business of the business. Can you talk a little bit about why the change and how you approached it?
Yeah, it was housed a very successful publisher, but had been flailing and falling down. And the last issue they produced was 32 pages, I believe. Didn't have focus, and we, as our company, Lessiter Media, we were editorial first, sales a distant second. We had good circulation, but we were really hung our hat on editorial, and we thought that we could do some real positive things by focusing on the editorial, which was not the strong suit of the publisher that had it earlier. So I remember writing a memo. I'd spent the day out in Fort Atkinson meeting with the team and came back and wrote a memo to my dad on what I thought we needed to do. And it was going deep with editorial, benchmarking facts and figures, being the voice of the dealer, including calling majors and other, people on the table when they were doing something that was going to affect dealers. And we followed it. Dave came with us within that first year, and I think we believed in that memo. It was a one-page, this is what we're going to do with this thing, and just kind of executed from there.
All right, so it wasn't very long after acquiring it to when you had to do that first issue. Can you share some of just memories of getting that first one out the door? Yeah,
that was a doozy, and it makes me recall how much I appreciate the two of you we're working with, collect 15 years each of you. We got it. We were already tight staffed, and I put the entire issue together. We had one of our staffers wrote an article, but the rest was on my shoulders. And I went out to Ohio and I met with Dave Kaler of the Ohio Michigan Equipment Dealers Association and Bill Garling. Spent a half day with them, and they lined me up with a couple of dealers they thought were doing something special in that area. And so I went immediately from Columbus to those two dealers. Both of those two dealers were featured in that first issue of Farm Equipment. We had was fortunate in that New Holland was running a big press event in Fargo. I think it was maybe 9 days after we acquired it, that had to do with pre-selling and gave us a good pre-selling angle. And then we did a big survey, like we used to do back in the day, where you send a fax out to dealers and ask them a question. And we did a big subject on niche equipment focus. But our first issue with our name on it, I think, was 56 pages. And we wanted to make a statement right out the back that this was a new day and that dealers and the manufacturers going to see something different in this magazine.
So it wasn't too long after that Dave came and joined Farm Equipment, but that wasn't the first time you and Dave, your first working together experience. Can you guys kind of share some history of your relationship and then what got Dave here to Farm Equipment?
You want to take the first part of that, Dave?
I joined Lessiter in 2005. And you and I go back to, I believe it was 1991, when I was looking for an associate editor who could grow into the position of managing editor. And I had hired, 3 or 4 different people, and they didn't work out. And then you showed up, and I said, I'm desperate. So I guess this young guy looks pretty good to me. And hired you, and it turned out that we were a great team. The magazine was Modern Casting, published by the American Foundry Society. And we were doing okay, but I had this goal of becoming the #1 magazine in the field, and I just knew I needed some help to get there. And when you came aboard, it was like that was the catalyst for us to move to the next level. And enjoyed having you, this fresh young guy with a lot of energy and ambition. And within a few years, we became the #1 magazine, overtaking a very large publisher. And that was my goal, was to first bring that magazine back to life. And I was faced with the similar position that you had with Farm Equipment, as our board of directors said, this magazine isn't doing well, either fix it or kill it. And so that was the goal, and we got there. We not only fixed it, we grew it. We added publications, another magazine while I was there, and we just did a lot of good stuff. And then I left and got into industrial sales for a few years, and I think you left a few years after I left. And one day I got a call from you out of the clear blue, and we worked it out.
What I remember about it was that you had left the furnace business, and you happened to said, "Hey, you want to come have lunch?" And so you were up in the office, and we were just it was a social, a friend lunch, and our managing editor, who we were having a real hard time with, happened to resign while Dave was in the office that day. And I came back in while I was talking with him. My dad took Dave into his office, for a bit, and Dave came back in, and I said, "Well," I half jokingly said, "You feel like flexing that writing muscle again, because I just lost our managing editor. I was thinking about a freelance assignment." Do you remember that, Dave?
Yeah, in fact, I did do a freelance article for you. That's right. Where you were testing me out at that point.
Yeah. David written a article on what it takes to succeed in skid steer sales. And Dave insisted that there be a sidebar in there on safety for the dealer's responsibility in selling and demonstrating safety to skid steers. And we republished that sidebar, which still holds up very true today, last spring or so.
So once we had Dave on board, still had some learning we were doing. Can you guys talk about kind of in those early days, the importance that the Farm Equipment Manufacturers Association had to how we got things moving and learning the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a good little story here too, because it was unusual where Dave and I were kind of feeling things out, and we were very close in addition to a professional relationship, and wanted to make sure this was a good fit for both of us. And the FEMA annual meeting happened to be coming up, and I said, Dave, would you like to go on a trip to Phoenix together? We'll call on some dealers. We'll meet a lot of manufacturers. And we roomed together on that trip. Well, it was an aggressive trip. Our plane arrived at midnight. We drove out to Yuma to see the booth machinery people, saw one of the RDO facilities. It was a race, testing out both of our pace on that one and endurance. But Dave got to size up the industry, and I think the FEMA people were also sizing up Dave at the same time. By the end of the trip, we both wanted to do this, and so it was a very good use of some expense dollars to take Dave along on that trip. And we made for years we went to the FEMA meetings together, and I ended up serving on their board. There's some great friendships and people who wanted to see us succeed. They knew that the dealers needed a voice, the shoreline manufacturers needed a voice, and there were a lot of very instrumental to us getting our arms around what this business was all about, I'd say.
Any memories from that first trip from you, Dave?
I don't remember it because I'm sure Mike's going to remind me of what went on. But if I recall, like Mike said, we shared a room, and he didn't like sharing a room with me. And so he said his goal was to make enough money where we didn't have to share rooms when we traveled.
Yes. A very important and necessary goal was to be able to afford our own rooms.
You really knew you made it then once you could two hotel rooms.
Yeah.